Welcome, everyone, back to the VBC Bible Institute and podcast, and welcome back to our course, A Journey Through the Bible. I know it's been a long time. I do, and I tell you, I am sincerely sorry. I really am. I hate that there's been a delay, but I've been struggling with exactly what to do. Look, I am very aware that I undertook something that was bigger than I didn't see the magnitude of the task. Maybe I did, but I convinced myself I was going to be able to pull it off. But with so many other things that I'm trying to do, I'm not doing a very good job maintaining what I want to do and how I want to accomplish this. But there's really a different issue at stake here. There's not, or another issue really that's causing the problems. It's not so much the magnitude of trying to take everyone a journey through the entire Bible. And the part of the problem was, I don't know if I had it really thought out of exactly how I wanted to approach the journey through the Bible. So I think I've struggled with how I want to do this. But part of the issue was I had this vision in my mind, right? I had this vision, and it's one thing to have a vision. And when I say a vision, I'm not talking some, spiritual, mystical thing. I'm just saying I had this thought in my mind, right? I envisioned something working a certain way. And then when I started to try to carry that out and doing the recording and doing these live broadcasts for the VBC Bible Institute, it didn't really start coming across the way I envisioned it. My thought process was this: do a Bible Institute / podcast. And I want it to come across like there's about 5, 6, 7, 10 of us sitting, in the church, sitting in a classroom, and that we're just going to open the Bible and work through the text together, right? In a kind of a very conversational kind of way, trying to just kind of talking our way through it and working through it and doing some assignments and just gaining a correct understanding of the text and being, challenged with the scriptures and learning, and just this kind of really almost not so much in a formal way, like me just lecturing, but kind of more in a conversational kind of way. And I don't even know if that's an accurate way of describing it. I guess the problem is I can't really articulate my vision for it. But let me just state that there have been times so far in the Bible Institute and this journey through the Bible that I felt like I kind of came close to that. And there's other times that I know I fell very short of that. And there's times where I felt like I should have done better instruction. And then there's times I felt like I didn't do a very good job in the instruction. So I'm still trying. I told you this was going to be a work in progress, and I'm still trying to figure this out. Some of you have been doing the assignments, and that's another thing. I know that I've got there's few people who are actually, I'll call them the active students. In other words, they're actually participating and sending me their work, and there's a lot of passive students who I'm not hearing from. So it's like, how do I work this? And I didn't think about all of these. I should have thought about all of these questions from the start. Like, how do I really want to pull this off? And another big factor that really got in the way is my original thought was I can just use some of this, like for Sunday school hour, a Wednesday night. I can just do some of the instruction there. There will be actual people in front of me. So I can do it kind of in an informal, conversational kind of way, asking them questions and kind of hopefully it would get that feeling. It would be easier to get that feeling because I would be in front of real people. But then COVID messed everything up. And so here we are trying to figure all of this out. I don't want to quit already. That would be horrible. So I'm going to continue. I just hope I can continue and produce something that is worthwhile. That's the best. It's the best I can do. And I apologize. There's been time after time I've been here at the church, and I'll like, Genesis 12. I need to do, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So, but well, here we are, and we're going to just proceed, and hopefully this is beneficial. The goal for this session is we're going to go back to Genesis 12. We've introduced Genesis 12. I've given you some very specific things to start working on, right? Some very specific things to work on. what you need to do, and remember, I told you that as we approach this study of Genesis 12, remember everything transitions from kind of events to really focusing on a person, and we're going to be focusing on Abraham. And I remember I said, how should we approach this and what should we think about and struggle with? And I said, how do we judge Abram and Abraham? How do we judge Abraham, same person, but I'm giving you both names. How do we judge him? Because do we judge him according to the Mosaic law that's not been given there? Well, if we do that, we have people who do other actions in Genesis where we say, well, the way he found his wife, he probably married his sister. Well, and the reason he could do that is because there was no law against it. Well, if there was no law against it, well, then when Abraham does something, can we say it's wrong if there was no law against it? So how do we judge him? Number two, how do we understand the covenant made with Abraham and its application to Israel? This is going to be one of the major things that this Bible Institute, for this Bible Institute and this journey through the Bible, I'm really going to spend a lot of time on this question about the covenant and it made with Abraham and its application to Israel. Next, Abraham covenant and the new covenant. What's the correlation or connection between the Abrahamic covenant and the new covenant? What's the connection, similarities, differences, etc.? How do we understand circumcision and its connection to baptism? All right, we're going to do that. And then I gave you an assignment. Remember, I told you to write down the content of the Abrahamic covenant. I told you to look to do some study on covenant, looking up in a Bible dictionary. What is a covenant? How do we understand covenant? Do some reading about the new covenant. This is a quick review of your assignment. Do some research on circumcision. What do you find about circumcision? Baptism. Then I told you to look up baptism in the Westminster Catechism. Okay, I think or the larger catechism, I think. And then the covenant confession of faith. Right? Look up the covenant in the confession of faith. And I think I said Westminster Confession of Faith as well. So larger catechism and the Westminster Confession of Faith. And I told you to do all of that. And there's a reason I told you to do all of that, because that gives a specific theological perspective, and we're going to challenge a lot of that theological perspective. Okay, so now what do I want to do today? Well, today I want us to I'm going to consider just the very first part of Genesis chapter 12 in a devotional way. I want to give you some very devotional thoughts, some very practical thoughts. Because when we come to Genesis chapter 12, all right, I've got to mark a couple of things here. When we come to Genesis chapter 12, we know we're getting ready to begin a journey where we follow the life of an individual, this person by the name of Abram, whose name will become Abraham. And and you can hear me turning the pages in my Bible, when we get here, we have to acknowledge that not only are we being told what happened in their lives, that their lives serve as an example, things that we can learn, good examples, bad examples, that we don't really just look at it and go, here was the man Abram, his name became Abraham, here's what he did good, here's what he did bad, in a very academic way. But there's some practical things to gain from it. And I just want to use this session, this episode, to simply give you at least two devotional thoughts that I really want you to stay with you and think about, all right? Now, before I give you the devotional thoughts, let's remind ourselves of something. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 says, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee." Stop right there. The idea of had. Now remember, there's some dispute here. There's some debate about whether there were two calls. And if there were two calls, when did they occur? Where did they occur? All right. I remember I've got one commentary here. Now the Lord had said unto Abram in Ur of the Chaldees, before he came and dwelt in Haran, and this as it seems from Acts chapter 7, verse 2. And so, and how some interpret it. But others think that what follows was said to him in Haran, and so in the words may be more literally rendered, and the Lord said unto Abraham, after the death of Terah, who died in Haran, and indeed it is highly probable that there were two appearances of God to Abraham, and that the same words, or very near the same words, were spoken to him at two different times. first in the Ur of the Chaldees, and then in Haran. Now, I say all of that simply to say there's some dispute about how many calls. Was he called before, and then Terah, Terah died, I believe, in verse 32, and the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. And then, so did God show up at one point and say, hey, you got to leave? Well, if he did, it seems like Terah takes Abraham, his son, Lot, the son of Haran, his son's daughter, Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son's Abram's wife, which is Sarai. And they went forth from the Ur of the Chaldees unto the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. So that, in other words, there was a call, and they all came. Then Terah dies, and then the Lord had said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. Then there was a separate call because maybe some say maybe Abraham stopped or he needed the new call. And so God shows back up and says, hey, I told you to leave. Now, come on. Whatever the case may be, we could debate that all day, right? People like to do it. People like to interpret it different ways because it can make for a good sermon. You know, sometimes we get called and then we stop and we have to be called again. Or this shows Abraham's reluctance to obey God completely. There's a lot of different ways you can try to frame it for a sermon. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. A call is made to get out, to come, to go. And that's the main thing to take from it. So just want to remind you of all of that controversy, and you can do, and Acts 7:2. I think it's Acts 7:2. Let me go look. Acts 7:2 really becomes the part that really influences how people interpret this. Acts chapter 7, verse 2. Acts chapter 7, verse 2. This is Stephen's speech to the council. And then he said, then said the high priest, are these things so? And he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran, and said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I will show thee. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran, and from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land wherein you now dwell. All right, so Acts 7:2 is what sometimes becomes the determinant factor in how you interpret all of this. Look, let me make it simple. You can spend all day debating on when was it one call, two calls, where did the call? You can debate that all day. The thing is, there was a call. That's what we want to focus on, and that's what we're going to focus on. But we're going to look at this call. We're going to look at the call, and we're going to look at who was called, and we're going to use the call and who was called, to serve as a devotional kind of study for you and for me. Hopefully that will convict us, all right? When we think of the call here, I cannot help but think. I cannot help but, like, for my own cross-referencing, if I'm doing a study, is Luke chapter 9, verse 23. It just comes to mind. I know this is not a direct cross-reference that directly applies, but it's a cross-reference that at least comes to my mind, and hopefully you will agree with me, all right? Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Here we read this. Luke chapter 9, verse 23. All right? Luke chapter 9, verse 23, and Jesus is speaking, and he said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, there's three parts to this kind of call, right? There's three parts. If anyone's going to come after him, this is what we have to do. Deny self. Take up a cross daily. That's die to self. Deny self, die to self, follow Christ, follow him. So it's a denial of self, it's a death to self, and it's a following. You're not following yourself, right? You're turning from yourself. I think that's a good way of putting it. Let's do it that way. So the call that Christ gives in Luke 9:23 is a call to deny yourself, to die to yourself, and to what did I say? Turn from yourself. Yeah, turn from yourself. So let's do it again. Deny yourself, die from yourself, turn from yourself. And I say turn from yourself because you're following him. So in other words, you're no longer following yourself. You're following him. You're turning from yourself. You're denying self, dying to self, turning from self. That is what Christ calls. And it's just interesting that in some aspects, we see that in the call of Abraham. We see this in this call because look what he's told to do. Go back to Genesis chapter 12. Look what he's called to do. Go to Genesis chapter 12. And I think you can see this. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, again, whether it's already been said, however we want to interpret that, there was a call. And listen what he's told to do. Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. Abraham is going to have to deny himself. He's going to have to deny what he wants. In a sense, he's going to have to deny himself. He's going to have to die to himself. And look what else he's going to have to do. He's going to have to turn from himself because guess what he's doing? He's turning from all of that. He's turning from where he wants to go. And he's going to now follow God who's going to take him to a land that he will show thee. I'm not even telling you where you're going. You're going to follow me. You're not going to follow yourself. This is so part of the Christian life, the Christian walk, the Christian journey, your whole Christian life. No matter where, no matter if you're just a lay person, whether you're going to be a pastor, no matter what you're going to be, what you're going to do, it's just this three things that you have to remind yourself every day. I got to deny myself. I got to die to self, and I got to turn from self. Christianity is a religion. Is a religion that is opposed to self. It's not the exaltation of self. Religion is the killing of Christianity is the religion of killing self. When I say killing self, not in a literal sense, but you are literally denying yourself. What I don't want to go there. Doesn't matter where you want to go. So I've got to die to that, and I got to turn from me. I think it's a beautiful picture of that. It's a beautiful picture. And I want you to see that these principles show up over and over and over again. And I think this is a very important lesson. What we're going to see in Abraham is there's going to be times he does a good job of denying himself, dying to himself, and turning from himself. And then we're going to see times where he does it seems he does the opposite. He's not denying himself, he's not dying to himself, and he's not turning from himself. I mean, there's lots of discussion about how we read this, but look what happens, right? Okay, look at verse 4. All right, so he tells him to get thee out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. You got to get out of your country. So again, you got to deny yourself. From your kindred, you're going to have to die to yourself. From your father's house, unto a land that I will show you. You're going to have to turn from yourself. You're going to have to follow me. And then note what happens in verse 4. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Now, Lot went with him. Now, I've had people tell me that they think that wasn't wrong. That was perfectly okay, perfectly right. That was perfectly fine because you're supposed to take care of your family. Now, of course, they're borrowing from other parts of the Bible to come here because is there any scripture here about, there's no, like, again, it's always interesting how people will borrow from other texts of scripture to say, here's how we judge him. Now, again, I'm borrowing from Luke 9. I'm not borrowing from Luke 9 in order to judge him. What I'm doing is saying that Luke 9 offers a principle that I think Abraham lives out. So I don't know. I'm saying that according to the command, he's supposed to leave everyone, and Lot's with him, which seems to indicate that he didn't leave everyone. That indicates to me that there was an aspect of he did not deny himself. He wasn't dying to himself. Now, he seemed to me not following himself in the sense that he's following where God is leading him, but he has Lot with him. Is that an example of not doing so? As we go through, just remember these three things: deny self, die to self, turn from self. Does Abraham always do so? And you know what we're going to find out? He doesn't. You know why? I think to me that's a beautiful picture because that's going to be the struggle of your whole Christian life. There's going to be days that, man, you're really denying yourself and dying to yourself and not following yourself. And there's going to be days where you're basically worshiping yourself and exalting yourself, and it's going to happen, and you got to realize it. Right? So I think that's important. Now, another thing we see here in the text, I think is very interesting. Yeah, we there's some more we could say here, but that's okay. Verse 4 of Genesis 12. Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. 75 years old. Now, if you remember, part of the promise is that if you look at verse 2, I'm going to make a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee. So I'm going to bring a nation out of you. God chooses a 75-year-old man and tells him, I'm going to bring a nation out of you. Ultimately, it's going to be a promise that, of a child. And they're like, wait, how is this possible? They're beyond the ability to produce children. So God chooses someone who's 75 years of age to start this journey, so that he's going to deny himself, die to himself, and not follow himself, turn from himself. And he takes his wife, and then there's this, a promise of, basically, from your seed, and it's going to be like, well, wait a minute, how is this all going to happen? And so there's another principle that I thought of here, all right? Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians, because you have to ask yourself, why would he choose Abraham, right? A 75-year-old man. Why? And that he's going to have to produce a child. Like, why would he choose him? Well, I think there's a principle here. Now, we could go to Romans, because I think Romans lays out kind of a theological reason behind it. But go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26. I think there's something to this. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26. For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and things which are despised hath God chosen. Yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. Now, when you look at Abraham and Sarai, from a human perspective, when you look at from them from a human perspective, they are weak. They are weak. They are foolish. I mean, like, and where are you going? Oh, I'm just going here. God's going to take me to a land, and ultimately from me, there's going to be a nation. And you're 75 years old. You're not going to be able to do this. When they reach a point where they're completely unable in themselves to produce the child, God intervenes. Now, God's trying to demonstrate something there theologically, which we could go to Romans to see. But I think this principle shows up in Abraham. They appear to be the weak, the foolish, the thing that should not be able to accomplish anything. And again, I love this verse. I love this verse because the base things of the world and things which are despised, God has chosen to bring to naught with the things which are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. God uses the weak, the foolish, the thing that's incapable of doing it, so that no flesh can glory in his presence, so no one can glory in its presence. And I wonder that like we have to see this a little bit in Abraham. Him and Sarai, from a human perspective, are they the correct people to choose? Like if you were choosing for this mission, you're going to go to a land that God's going to show you, and from you too is going to rise a nation. You too, you're going to have to do it. Would you choose this old 75-year-old man and his wife to go do this, or would you choose someone younger, stronger, I don't know, not past the childbearing age? I think we would. We would choose from an earthly perspective. And God chooses from a different perspective. He's choosing two people that they're not going to be able to glory in his presence. There's nothing to glory about because they don't have ultimately the ability to fulfill what God is calling them to do. God's going to have to do it, which demonstrates Abraham is used as a proof of our salvation. Salvation is not apart from us. It's God's work. We cannot do it. So there's a theological answer. So really, there's two kind of devotional ideas I want you to take from Abraham's initial call here. All right, two things I want you to take from it. That Abraham, in a sense, is going to demonstrate to us this idea that when God calls you, you deny self, die to self, and turn from self. And Abraham, right from the very start, he's got to leave his family. He's got to leave the land, the family. He's supposed to leave all of that behind, and that goes against everything that we want and our wants and our ways. He's got to leave all of that. And Abraham at times is going to demonstrate when he's doing it, when he's not going to do it, just like we do, right? But we also see, in a sense, where Abraham and Sarah's them being chosen. So what they're called to do, right? They're called to leave all of this stuff is very similar to what Jesus calls us to do, to be his disciples and to follow him. But the people who were called in the call of Abram and Sarai are examples of how God chooses the foolish, the weak, so that no flesh can glory in his presence. And we should see that in Abram and Abraham and Sarai. And please know what happens. They realize that nothing is happening. They become to realize we can't do this. Nothing is happening, and so they try to come up with ways to make it happen. And that leads to all kinds of problems. So in many cases, they prove themselves to be foolish, and sometimes they prove themselves to be unwise. They prove themselves not to be patient and listen to God, but God ultimately accomplishes what he wants to accomplish through them. So that Abraham, Sarai, Sarah, they can't glory in God's presence because it's ultimately God who did it through them, in spite of them. Now, here's a very important theological question, right? Or a very important devotional question, and I really want you to think about this. Do you think that too many times within Christianity, within the church, we ignore the foolish, the weak, like we overlook? In fact, look at this, right? All right, listen. That not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things of the mighty. The base things of the world, which are despised, hath God chosen. Yea, the things which are not to bring to naught the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. I want you to hear that. Is it possible that as Christians, we make these people the celebrity pastor, the big ministry, and sometimes do we look to listen what appear like? I know we say that we don't do this, but I think if you look, sometimes as Christians, do we not look for the wise? Do we not look for the mighty? Do we not look for the noble? Do we really look to the things that appear to be foolish and the things that appear to be weak and the things that that the world despises? Do we look for the things that are weak, foolish, and are despised, or do we look for the things that look good, sound good, the things that are wise? They got the right look, they got the right voice, and we make them the next celebrity pastor, the next big thing. I mean, some people, they'll pull up to a church and they'll look at the building, and if the building looks, that looks embarrassing to go into that church. Like we despise that. We want the big building with the nice parking lot, with the big program and the nice pews and the nice air conditioning and the nice heater. We want the things that are not despised in the eyes of the world. If my church is going to be despised from the world, I'm going to be embarrassed. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to look foolish. Do we want the big cathedral that looks beautiful and even the world loves it? I'm not saying that we have to tear down the cathedral and everyone should be looking, doing church in a broken down building. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, do you think there's times we overlook that maybe the things that God chooses and the thing that God wants to use goes against what we would choose? Like hey, there's two pastors. Well, he's got, he looks nice. His voice is nice. We choose. I think sometimes our choosing and what we look to and turn to goes against this very principle. He chose a 75-year-old man and his wife to go into some land they didn't know where they were going with all the possible dangers and difficulties, and that they were going to bring a nation out of them. And he waits to the point where clearly they're beyond the ability to produce children physically, and God has to step in because it's not about their ability. He chose that which was weak, that which would be despised by the world, that, hey, there's nothing there. Is it possible that we miss this principle? We don't operate from this vantage point. Is it possible that we miss this completely in our spiritual lives, in your spiritual life and my spiritual life? I'll tell you, I don't want to be the weak thing. I don't want to be the thing despised. I want the world to think that I'm smart. I want the world to think that I don't want to be viewed as the weak, despised, foolish thing. I want to be like, oh, he's smart and no. I don't even want to be those things. Do you want to be that thing? Despised by the world, foolish, weak, incapable, mocked, laughed at? No. You don't want that. Do I want my church to people to drive by and despise it and mock it and look at it and talk down about it? No. I would want to be the one that, whoa, that's a good church. That's good preaching. No, I'm not saying that we throw out, people, hey, we want people who are not, that obviously this is giving a spiritual principle here. Like, we can take this too far and go, okay, we don't want anyone who's wise. We don't want anyone who's smart. We don't want anyone who can communicate clearly. We want, it's not to go to that extreme, but there's a principle here that we have to figure out how to apply it. Abraham is just interesting that he's the one's called, and that from a certain aspects of it, it just seems like that it's the bad choice. From a human perspective, like, why get someone younger, someone stronger, someone who's not so old, someone who, I just think that there's two very important principles there. All right, now, so there's two devotional principles. Right, first devotional principle, Luke 9:23, and the second one is 1 Corinthians 1:26 through 31. All right, now go back to Genesis chapter 12. Go back to Genesis chapter 12. All right, let's read all of this together now. Verse 1. Now the Lord had said, okay, we've talked about that, unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. Now look here. We start getting the initial parts of the promise of this covenant. I'm going to make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. All right, I'm not gonna say anything right now. Yeah, because we could. I want to, but I'm not. We'll stop right there. Okay, there you go. No assignment. Not going to give you an assignment. I'm not going to give you an assignment right now. All right, just meditate on those two devotional principles. The call to Christ is a call to self-denial, denying self, dying to self, and turning from self. Abraham, I think, is kind of a picture of this. Not always perfect, just like we're not always perfect. God chooses the weak, the thing that is despised, the foolish. And in some ways, when I looked at the call of Abraham and Sarai, or Abram and Sarai, I have to ask myself, well, come on, this just looks foolish. This looks ridiculous. And it is. That God's going to bring a nation out of two people who are old and can't have children seems pretty foolish. Yeah. Because Abraham and Sarah are not going to get the glory. God is. And I think maybe sometimes we do things to get the glory. We literally overlook and turn our eyes away from the things that seems to be despised. And maybe that's where we should be looking. Maybe we put too much emphasis on what the world looks at, and we use some of the same standards. We want looks good and sounds good, and we want, we don't want to be despised. We don't want to be foolish. And maybe that's hurt us spiritually. Something to think about. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right. Everyone have a great day. God bless.